Hello, Charlestown. I'm Mayor Treva Hodges, and I want to give you a full update on the animal shelter agreement that's been proposed in the city of Charlestown as an interlocal with the city of Jeffersonville and all other taxing units within Clark County. The reason I'm giving you this update is to clarify information and offer you full transparency, because due to some recent news articles and Facebook posts, we are beginning to get some calls and questions, and it's only fair to give you all of the facts as they stand. In April of 2024, we received a letter from the city attorney for Jeffersonville, Les Merkley. In that letter, he explained that there was a change in the interlocal agreement for animal control services, specifically the animal shelter, and that the cities were going to have an increase in their costs. Since 2017, the city of Charlestown has paid $26,145 a year for our use of the shelter. It's important to note that the city itself pays an animal control expert to pick up the animals and transport them, and for an emergency contract for after hours. So we provide the animal control services for the city ourselves and only utilize the shelter as a place to take the animals. The increase was steep. In fact, it was quite a shock. The proposed increase amount was $60,000. So when we received the notice that we would be going from $26,000 to $60,000, you can imagine that I had some concerns. The exact amount was $60,200. Now, this number is based off of population. So since Charlestown has about 7% of the population in Clark County within our municipal limits, they took the total number of the budget, which according to their paperwork was $860,000, and charged us 7% of that amount. It's my job to do due diligence, and when a bill comes in with that steep of an increase, it certainly is going to make me pause and take a look at things. So throughout the month of May, I did a little additional research and started asking questions of some of the other taxing units, those in Sellersburg and Clarksville, for instance. When we pulled the budget from the state gateway account, we found that the animal control budget for the city of Jeffersonville was $859,000, really close to that $860,000 amount that was used to calculate Charlestown's payment. But when I began to look at the line items, what I saw was that that total included all of the city of Jeffersonville's animal control department. That means that the total would have been paying for their animal control officer who does not perform services in the city of Charlestown, as well as their emergency contract, which also doesn't provide services for the city of Charlestown. So I began to reach out and ask if we could have a meeting to discuss this and revise the overall total. When you're dealing with multiple municipalities and multiple schedules in the summertime, you're also dealing with vacation schedules. It took us a while to be able to get to have that meeting. So I'm going to make sure you have the full timeline ahead of you. We received the original proposed agreement in April. Throughout May, we did a little research and talked to other communities and began to ask questions of the shelter. As it turns out, the animal shelter was going under a change of leadership. The director that had been there for a while was leaving, and a new director was taking the job. And that was happening in June. So again, a little bit of a slowdown. Finally, we were all able to get to have a meeting in July. So on July 16th, I was able to meet with Charlestown City Attorney and Charlestown's Animal Control, and with the new shelter director, who had been working at the shelter for a while, but new as the director, and the city attorney of Jeffersonville. And we were joined in that meeting by the town manager for Clarksville, Kevin Beatty. The town manager at Sellersburg, Charlie Smith, was unable to join us that time, but I know he had separate meetings with them. So we met on July 16th and explained our concerns about the total number of $860,000 being used being inaccurate because of the inclusion of a portion of the city of Jeffersonville's animal control services. The director and the attorney agreed with us that those numbers needed to come out. So we put everything on hold and waited to get those revised numbers. In August 22nd, I received an email from the director of the animal shelter with the revised total. So the total went from $860,000 to $715,309.82. That is the portion that Charlestown would be paying 7% of. When she sent those new totals, she also said that Mayor Moore had agreed to let us phase in to that total, a generous offer. So instead of paying 7% of that total up front, they were going to let us take 33% of that total, 7%, then 66%, then the full percentage. So the revised totals would be a graduated increase into the overall agreement. So that would have Charlestown paying $34,040.75 for 2025, $41,936.51 for 2026, and then $50,071.53 for 2027. A much more palatable way to ease into this. However, some other questions continue to arise. I wanted to make sure that we were getting the best value for our customers and for the animals. So I began to look at other agencies to see, is there a possibility that we move to another agency? It's perfectly reasonable to have done that. At no time were we questioning the superior work that's going on at the Jeffersonville Animal Shelter. It's just that with the location of Charlestown, we wanted to make sure that other surrounding counties wouldn't be able to be included. I asked for additional information from the animal shelter director, and she graciously supplied it. What we found out was that Charlestown's use accounted to 434 animals. Owner surrenders account for 139 of those animals. Returns, 13. Seized or custody, that means that Charlestown's animal control officer took that animal in, were 69. 119 of those animals were cats that were participated in the trap, neuter, release program. And then there were strays brought in by other people from Charlestown area of 94. Now, it's not really possible for them to break down those owner surrenders and strays based on the municipal limits. They go by zip code. And as you know, a large portion of the 47111 zip code is not in the municipal limits. Now, we're not paying based on use, we're paying based on population. But our question was, should we be paying based on use? So as a part of our due diligence, we did investigate other agencies and we did ask questions of the director to make sure that we understood the services that we were getting. But let's go back to the timeline first. So we received the new amounts in August, on August 22nd, and we received the offer to graduate in, which is fantastic. What we did not receive then was the revised interlocal agreement. So at the September council meeting, I told the council about the new numbers, but I did not have a revised agreement to be able to share with them at that time. I wasn't able to get a revised agreement in time until our November meeting. At that November meeting, I presented the council with the revised interlocal. Our council president, Brian Hester, happened to notice that something was wrong with the numbers though. When we looked at the numbers in the breakdown, it showed that in year 2, the number would be 41,9376.51, which isn't a valid number. And then in year 3, 50,07.53. So there needed to be a little bit of clarity with that. So immediately following that meeting on November 3rd, I emailed the director again and I explained those numbers and I pointed out that we needed a corrected revised agreement and we needed it before our next council meeting on December 2nd because our council meets once a month. We did not receive that revised corrected agreement until the late afternoon of December 2nd. You see, everything that we've received from the interlocals comes through regular mail, not through email. And we did not have time to get that in front of our attorneys for their review in order to add it to the agenda for that meeting. I emailed the director of the animal shelter and explained that we did not receive the agreement in time and that I would put it on the agenda for our January 2025 meeting. I also asked some clarifying questions at that time because another observation that was made by our council and myself was that the numbers for the city of the town of Sellersburg came in less than original. So although Sellersburg pays a little bit more than we do at an 8% contribution, their first year total was actually a decrease from what they were paying before. So when we looked at the numbers, we saw that in year one, Charlestown was going to be paying a little bit of excess of $34,000, but that Sellersburg was only going to be paying $18,884.16. Now by year three, they got to their full total, but we wanted to know why we were paying more and another community was paying less. We did not receive an answer right away. We were told that it was an error, and that was all we were told. It wasn't until after our latest council meeting that I received an email on January 17th from the city attorney explaining that he had sent an amendment to the town of Sellersburg. And I have since confirmed that Sellersburg has received that amendment. I do not know if they're going to pass it, but at least I have the information to share with our council. So you can see that this has taken quite a while, and it's not always the fault of the city of Charlestown as to why this agreement conclusion has taken so long to receive, because we didn't receive the actual correct amended interlocal agreement until December of 2024. I put it on the agenda for January, but in the meantime, we had some additional questions that we wanted to make sure we were exploring. We had narrowed it down to the possibility of looking at moving our agreement to Scottsburg. After additional research about that, it's very clear that the best option for the city of Charlestown, at least the animals in the city of Charlestown, will be to stay in the city of Jeffersonville at the Jeffersonville Animal Shelter. The Jeffersonville Animal Shelter has done an amazing job taking care of animals. There's never been a question about that. It was more about making sure that we were covering our finances as responsibly and ethically as possible. For your information, the Jeffersonville Animal Shelter does a fantastic job with their intake and outtake. Just this week on Thursday, myself and our council member Chuck Deaton got a tour of the animal shelter. We're very pleased with the status of the shelter. It was wonderful to see the amount of donations that are received, which is a question that we had. It's very reasonable to ask how much of the budget is being covered by nonprofit work or donations. And the answer is, you guys are phenomenal about donating food and cat litter so that the shelter rarely has to buy food. That's great. Please keep that up. Also, the shelter is well managed, the animals are well taken care of, they receive the veterinary care they need, and their adoption rate is phenomenal. In 2014, they had a live release rate of only 60%. In 2023, that live release rate went to 92%. So good job, Jeffersonville Animal Shelter. Also, it's important to note that the Jeffersonville Animal Shelter underwent a major renovation, and the city of Jeffersonville paid $1.7 million for that renovation all on their own. They never asked any of the other municipalities for support on that, but they did fund it themselves. And we did confirm with our meeting on Thursday that the city of Jeffersonville has been covering the gap in the budget for all of these years. And they will continue to cover that gap in the future. That was a major question that we wanted confirmation of before we move forward. And we're happy that we got that information. Another benefit to the Jeffersonville Animal Shelter is the spay-neuter voucher program. In 2023, the city of Charlestown residents used 130 vouchers for a total of $6,500. That is a program by which any resident in Clark County can go to the shelter and receive a $50 voucher towards a spay or neuter of a cat or a dog. And there are certain clinics that honor those vouchers. So it's basically like getting a $50 coupon towards a spay and neuter, which is fantastic. There's no income level required. All you have to do is be a resident of Clark County. That adds an added value that we did not find at other shelters. So once again, through our research, we have found that the actual shelter itself is fine. The delay in this decision has been largely administrative, making sure that we had an accurate interlocal agreement, making sure that all of our questions were answered, and that's taken a little bit of time. Another issue that we had was that in the original agreement that was sent back in May, Jeffersonville's total was included. So when you look at that, you see that Jeffersonville was in there at 42%. But when we received the subsequent revisions, that total was removed. We wanted to make sure that the city of Jeffersonville was also paying, and we did, and they are paying the gap as we phase in. So there's credit to be given on multiple parts, and there's a little bit of critique to be given on multiple parts. Our final questions related to the nature of the interlocal agreement as it stands. It is population-based. In other examples where we have a population-based sample, so for instance, the Clark County 911 dispatch, each of the underlying units of government has a person who sits on a board. So the city of Charlestown has a member who sits on the fiscal board for the Clark County 911. That means that every year as they're working on their budget, the city of Charlestown has a voice in that budget. So a couple of years ago, when they were looking at raises for their employees, our representative was there at the table discussing those things. We don't have that with the interlocal agreement with the animal control, and we have asked for that to be revised when this is looked at in another 3 years. Because right now, one city, the city of Jeffersonville, has 100% control over what that budget looks like. And they really don't increase that until every 3 years. That's how we ended up in a situation where we have these incredibly sharp increases. Because in 2012, the city of Charlestown was only paying $8,600 for animal shelter services. And then from 2017 all the way up until last year, we were only paying $26,000. To go from that to $50,000 is a steep increase. We were proposing a fiscal board made up of the units of government as a part of this interlocal, because then the budget can be amended every year with our feedback, and we can work that into our city budget as we work on it every year as well. So it actually helps save the city of Jeffersonville some money in the long term, because it means they have to cover less of the gap every single year, rather than this 3-year agreement. Another option would be to look at it as a use-based service. So if the city of Charlestown is turning in this many animals through our animal control, then maybe there should be a fee for that. It's just an option to explore. Now, the director was quick to explain, and very thoroughly did so, of why it's a problem to charge owner surrenders. Not everybody who's surrendering an animal has the ability to pay, and we certainly don't want to penalize those. We certainly don't want to release strays out into the community. So we're very aware of that too. We just hope that as we go forward over the next 3 years, before this is renegotiated in 3 years, that we have an opportunity to sit at the table a little bit earlier in the process so that we can understand and do the best for our citizens. Because at the end of the day, our responsibility in the city of Charlestown is to Charlestown residents, including the furry ones. So I hope that answers some of your questions about what's happening with the animal shelter agreement and Charlestown's option. After our visit on Thursday, I sent a memo to all of our council members explaining what was answered and the questions that were asked, and kind of going over where we've been with the timeline. And I made the formal recommendation to the council that they go ahead and engage and sign the agreement at our next council meeting, which will be on Monday, February 3rd. I also communicated that to the mayor of Jeffersonville, Mike Moore. I let him know that our questions had for now been answered. I encouraged him to include us in the process when the next negotiation comes around, and I told him that we would more or less be recommending that the council sign it on February 3rd. I have no reason to believe that the council won't go ahead and sign that. It's our top priority to make sure that our city streets are safe and that our community is well taken care of, and that's what we're doing. Sometimes it just takes a little bit longer to get those things done for a variety of reasons. So there you have it, full transparency. If you have any other questions about Charlestown's role in the animal shelter agreement, please just reach out to me. You can email me at mayor@cityofcharlestown.com, or you can text me or call me on my cell, which is 502-297-4390. Thanks so much, Charlestown.